Ladies and gents, this is the moment you've been waiting for. A podcast for podcasters. This is Creating the Greatest Show, and I'm your host, Casey Cheshire. Join me as we interview podcast hosts and investigate the ingredients of a successful interview podcast. We'll talk mistakes, earned skills, powerful questions, and more. This show is sponsored by Ringmaster, completely done for you B2B podcast production. Okay, all right. I hit the button and just things start happening. The fireworks go off. I can't wait to introduce my guest today. He's a serial entrepreneur, a marketer, a leader, a thought leader in the world of podcasting and marketing. And I would call him, he's the guesting czar. He knows more about podcast guesting than probably anyone on the planet. And I can't wait to crack open his skull and just learn from him. And he's constantly studying the industry. He's constantly studying guesting, podcasting, all these things. And he's got studies coming out, and he's also got his own podcast coming out called Ordinary to You, Amazing to Others. I can't wait to introduce you to the podcast interview marketing king himself, the author of Podcast Guest Profits, Chief Evangelist Officer, and founder of Interview Valet, Tom Schwab. Welcome, sir.
Casey, thank you for having me here, and I'm going to own that, right? I'll take king and czar of podcast guesting. Early on, one of our clients called me the fairy godmother of podcast guesting. And Carrie Wilkerson is such a nice lady. I'm like anybody else, I would be insulted by that, but I owned it.
Well, we've upgraded you. You know, now you are the absolute dictator. You're both king and czar. I don't know if you can be both, but I guess if you are king, you can just decide that you're king and czar of the world.
Who am I to argue with you?
Right? Yes. No, you can't argue. I'm the host. So, hey, man, there's so much experience in there. I want to just sort of get to start learning from you. So I want to ask you this question. It's that question we use to start off every show and interview. Tom, pull back the curtain for us on your experience and share your most important strategy for a great interview podcast.
Well, I think and I love that you're asking strategy.
Yeah.
Because that is what's important. That's what's going to change your business, not a tactic that's going to be outdated, right? And I want to propose to you that you're not one funnel away, you're one conversation away, right? And we're all told, oh, you're just one funnel away. You need to break through the noise and do all this. And think about it. You know, the best things don't come through funnels, right? Your best clients probably didn't come from there. Your best team members, your best partners. Heck, my wife, right? She did not come through a funnel. It came through conversations. It came through introductions. And I think the higher the value of the relationship, and that could be a business relationship or a personal relationship, the more conversations it's going to take. So if you're trying to land big clients, right, the thing that works for a $5 tripwire product isn't going to work for a 5-digit consulting contract. You know, there's a great book out there called Clicksand, how digital marketing is ruining your business. And I love how Bill Troy in there points out that whales don't click and big fish don't swim through funnels, right? And I think too often now we're being sold this idea that the tactic is, oh, just build a funnel and do more, break through the noise. And people are forgetting that it takes the conversation. It always has. It did for our grandparents. It will for our grandchildren. And I think when you said strategy, the strategy is, how can I have great conversations with people that could be my great blank, employees, partners, customers? Focus on the conversations and the results will flow.
One conversation away from success, connecting, one connection away from achieving those goals you have. Talk to me about the differences. You mentioned this, like the difference between someone who's buying a $5 thing from you versus a $500,000 thing. What changes? And in the context of podcasting, what do we need to be thinking about with our guests? How do we need to be treating them? How do we need to be, how do you set these conversations up for success?
Mm-hmm. And I think it's really what's it going to take for success?
Okay.
Right? Because if you're selling a $5 product, I don't need to know a relationship, right? My risk in that is very low, right? So if I buy a $5, pack of gum or something and it doesn't work out,
Yeah.
I throw it away. There's not a lot of risk in that. And so with that, yeah, it's high volume, low touch, no soul to it, right? The cheapest person is going to win. And there are avenues for that. But if your business is built around know, like, and trust, if it's built around relationships, people are going to have to get to know you, right? And marketing is all about attracting your ideal people and repelling the other ones, right? And there's that old thing that you can't say enough of the right thing to the wrong people or the wrong things to the right people. And I would argue that as people have gone away from conversations and tried to automate everything and, just blast it, they could actually be hurting themselves, right? If you're a high level brand, if you're asking for a premium price, right? Do you really want to be seen everywhere, right? Do you want to be, we had one of our clients that came to me and I said, well, why do you want to do podcast interviews? And I loved his answer. He said, because I think that most of social media today is like advertising above a urinal. And I paused. I'm like, well, what do you mean by that? He's like, I'm a high level brand. All right. It's a high level. He was a consultant, right? If people saw me, everywhere on the bus, above the urinal, every time on social media, he's like, it would hurt my brand as opposed to help it. Right. Yeah. And if you think about it, if you want the best lawyer, if your child's life depends on the surgeon, right?
Yep.
Are you going to hire the one that you saw on the bus or, you saw in a social media ad? No, you're probably going to ask for a personal referral or someone that you want to know what this person's heart is, not just what their qualifications are. So I think more and more as it just gets to be noise, it's going to be the conversations that stand out, right? The noise is going to be the cheapest person wins, right? But that's not the way that's chasing the transaction. That's not necessarily growing a business.
Right. And, and I think, this particular conversation applies to both marketers, business owners, executives, as well as fellow podcasters, because I feel like from a podcasting side, we can dip into that a little too much. I've definitely received invites to podcasts that felt like a marketing funnel, right? It was like, click here. It's like a single LinkedIn message. And if you're interested, click here, you go there and they've got their Calendly page completely set up so that I can just fill in but too many questions, fill in the details. And I'm like, what the hell? I might as well be filling out a form on a website to get in your funnel, right? It felt so impersonal. It felt like they were trying to sell that $5 thing. And it wasn't a great start to the relationship. Talk to me about how do you do podcasting right in terms of relationships?
Yeah. And that's actually, there's a name for that. It's called the Trojan Podcast.
Trojan Podcast.
And it's the Trojan Podcast. And you see those where somebody just mass emails a bunch of people and, hey, I would love to have you on my podcast. And like you said, you fill out this big form. Then you may have a pre-call with someone, which is basically their sales development rep. Right? And then you get on this, if you pass that, then you get to be on the podcast. And the podcast is a quick 20-minute, tell me about your business, tell me about your biggest challenges, and then stop hitting record, and then they go into the pitch. And once you're in the funnel there, they keep doing that. And to me, that makes me vomit, right? Because it's just so impersonal. I think the best ones are the conversations, and not even an interview, right? Because we'd be having the same conversation if we were sitting down over a beer 100%. Or a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Right. I'm asking you questions. You're asking me questions. And those are the ones where I think people get to understand you. Right. Yeah. And at the end of the day, you don't want more leads. I don't want more leads, right? A lead is just a
is that
number.
true?
Yes. Right. To me, leads are like Facebook likes and Facebook followers and everything like that. You've got so many of these leads that come in, and just because they clicked on something,
Right.
ultimately,
That's not a lead. Right. Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
You're optimizing for great customers, people that understand who you are, right? And from that standpoint, if you bring them in the right way, you'll have fewer leads, you'll have better leads, you'll have better converting leads, right? It's all that thing of what are you optimizing for? If you just want more leads, you can get those. But at the end of the day, we want more great customers.
Right. Optimizing for leads over customers or over revenue is a surefire way to spend all your money and wind up with no job, right? It's a shortcut to oblivion.
I'd even push it one further, not optimizing just for sales, but for profits, right? There's an old joke in Michigan here that the car companies were losing money on every car, but they'd make it up in volume, right? So, one of my big things this year is better, right? More is not better. Better is better. And I think when you're on a podcast and you're sharing who you are, what you do, who you work best with, who you don't work best with, it really attracts your ideal people that you can help, and it repels those that you can't. And, why work them through your funnel? Why waste their time if they're not a good fit, right? Let's be honest with everybody on this. And I think the richer the marketing is, like a discussion or a personal invite or a physical stage, right? Physical stage or digital stage, that allows you to get so much better leads, clients, and really profitable customers.
It really, and I want to dive into better is better in just a second, but I would be remiss if I didn't talk to you about the world of guesting. And most people listening to this particular show, though we may need to rebroadcast this in many places because this is a really good conversation. But on Creating the Greatest Show, we have podcasters who are listening. But talk to us about whether these podcasters go out and be guests in other shows, or maybe tips they can give their own guests. How do you boil down guesting into just some core best practices?
Yeah. And I would say, from a podcast host standpoint, right? Where is the best place to get more podcast listeners? Probably listening to podcasts. Yeah. Right. If someone has never listened to a podcast before, if you spend $10,000 on Facebook, it's probably not going to make them listen to your podcast for the first time. So going on to other podcasts is a great way to build your own. And always focus on the who. Who do you want to talk with? Not necessarily what podcast do I want to go on, right? Because you can find different people at different areas. Like I can think of one client we had. He was a life and business coach. And, he talked about work-life balance. Sure. And all of a sudden we're like, hey, this podcast, 40 Plus Fitness, would be great for you. And he's like, I'm not a fitness guy. And I'm like, yeah, but when you're on a business podcast, you sound the same. You talk about work-life balance. These were his people. He wanted to talk with, people in their 40s and 50s that were trying for more. And so he went on there and said, you got to have work-life balance. It does you no good if you make your first million by 30, if you make your first widow by 40. Casey, that converted better than anything. Right. So I would always say, if you want to grow your podcast, one of the best ways to do that is going on other people's podcasts and think, who do I want to listen to my podcast, and what other podcasts would they be listening to? A great example of that, we were talking about him a little bit before this, Jordan Harbinger.
Shout out to Jordan.
Years ago. Oh, Jordan is amazing. I remember one Saturday he called me and he told me that he had just gotten fired from the Art of Charm. And I thought he was joking, right? That's like firing Seinfeld from the Seinfeld show. But, he did. He got voted out by his partners and he started the Jordan Harbinger show. But the way he launched that show, which is now multiples of what the Art of Charm ever was, is he went out to get on other podcasts, right? He was a nobody again because nobody knew where to find him. So he had to go out on shows and explain what his vision was, what he was trying to do, and attract people back there. Because it's not a zero-sum game. If I listen to your show, doesn't mean I'm not going to listen to somebody else's show.
Yeah. Interesting. And it's funny. We were talking about creating new podcasts, and I joked, at some point I need to just make the Casey Cheshire show just so I can talk to anybody. And obviously Jordan has the Jordan Harbinger show, so he's free to talk about the country. But I wanted to take you back to this point, the idea of targeting a fitness podcast, because the audience, 100%, it's very similar. It's like 40 plus. You know what? It was sad. At the moment I thought, those old people listening to that podcast. And I went, shit, I actually fit that category. Damn it. But it's so true, right? It doesn't have to all be, I'm a marketer, they're all marketing podcasts, or I need all business owner podcasts. There are interesting parallels to get to the same audience.
Yeah. And we've even seen this with clients that we've worked with that want to talk to accredited investors, right? And all right, so let's go on some investing shows where all they talk about is accredited investing. Well, you know what? You're going to sound like every other person there, right? A variation of it. What you really want to do is, talk to doctors, lawyers, professionals, maybe high-level sales reps. So if you get on those shows, you stand out a whole lot more. And what you're really trying to do is focus on your target audience, not necessarily what podcast, because often the podcast could be a competitor, right? And especially on the financial side, they're not going to let you in front of their audience. So you've got to find other ways to get them there.
Yeah. It takes a certain kind of person I kind of like the idea of bringing competitors into a podcast and then like smashing the status quo and just saying, let's expose people to this audience, and whether they promote it or not. There's something, creating relationships with competitors can be really interesting,
Oh yeah. And it's definitely a mindset thing. And most people don't have the abundance mindset where it's like, there's enough for everybody. And so you see that a lot in podcasting where they won't take a quote unquote competitor. But I agree with you. It's like, we're not for everyone. And, I'm friends with all of our competitors, and they focus on different things than we do, right? And have a different viewpoint on it.
So you're routinely getting guests finding guests, beautiful spots like this. And talk to me about, like, if you had 3 power tips for being a guest on a show, what is the most important top 3 in your mind?
Sure. So if you are a guest on somebody else's show, number 1, your job there is to make the host look like a genius for inviting you, right? Bring as much value as you can. Put everything out there, right? There's a great podcaster, Doug Sandler from Nice Guys on Business. And I loved how he said something. He's like, if you do a good job on my show, you don't have to promote yourself. I'll promote you. Right? So your job is not to do a pitch there. It's to bring value and make the host look like a genius for inviting you. So that's number 1. The second thing is be a gracious guest. And I think people forget about this, right? What does it mean to be a guest, right? It means you show up on time. You show up prepared. You say thank you afterwards. You compliment them, right? If you get invited to somebody's podcast, make sure you show up on time. Make sure your sound is great.
Right.
Make sure you know what their podcast is about. Make sure that you've listened to some episodes, and people are like, oh, I never thought about that. Well, think about going to somebody's house as a guest, right? You just wouldn't show up and go, I wonder if this is black tie or a barbecue, right? You better prepare and let them know beforehand, right?
Yeah.
Don't have them worrying 5 minutes before, are they going to show up or not?
Yeah.
So the first one is make the host look like a genius for having you there. The second one, be a gracious guest. And then the third one, is promote it as well and as diligently as the host does. And that's a big misconception in this industry. We'll have people say, well, I like guesting because I don't have to promote it. The host does that for me.
That sounds like a shitty guest. Let's be honest. That sounds terrible. Don't invite that person on my show, Tom.
Well, it's not a gracious guest, right? And podcasting is very, very small still. Yeah. Podcasters know podcasters. Yeah. If you go on somebody's show and you do like a one-night stand, show up for it and then never promote it, never do anything like that, you'll never get invited there, and your name is going to get spread around.
For sure.
Right? And it's not going to be a good thing. For sure. We had a client came to us and they were launching a new product and they had worked with another agency before. They weren't pleased with them and they heard great things about Interview Valet. And so before we engaged with them, we reached out to some of the podcasters that they had been on, 18 months before. Yeah. And Casey, to a person, they all said, oh yeah, we'd never have them on again. They never promoted anything. We didn't engage with them because they had burned so many bridges. Now the flip side is the people that are gracious guests, man, they're doing JV deals with the people. They're doing affiliate deals. Yeah. They're getting invited back, right? Yep. It's that start a relationship with it. Yep. So if you do those three things, you'll be better than 90% of the guests out there.
And as you mentioned that last one, not even the promote side, but I have met some terrible guests. Might I even say some weird people that maybe just not necessarily good, or just got not only a bad vibe, not like a bad interview, but just like a bad person vibe. When you violate these kind of rules, you're just like, ugh, not only would I never have you back on there, you're actually right. Podcasters do talk in the back channel and say, hey, did you interview that person? Don't do that unless you want to have a little entertaining afternoon. That was a terrible interview. I never even talked to that person. It was crazy. So yeah, there is something about, having that reputation and not violating these principles. I want to dive in though. That first one was making your host look like a genius. How do you do that? How do you make them look like a genius?
Genius for inviting you, right? You want to bring lots and lots of value. Right? You think about it. If you invited me to a dinner party and say, I want to invite you to some friends, right? I would come there and I would want to be engaging. Would want to be gracious. I wanted to give as much value as possible. I wouldn't go to every question. Well, you know what? Thanks, Casey. I'm glad you asked that. I've got a course, and if you just spend $49, you can get that answer. That would insult you. It would insult your guests there. No, put a lot of value there. And one of the things that most people don't know is the dirty little secret in podcasting is the number of interviews that have technical glitches, right? So if all of a sudden you show up and you're just selling your stuff, right? You're using and abusing that podcast. You don't have good audio. The host may be very gracious and not say to the end and then just give you an email. Oh, I'm so sorry. The file got messed up. It will never air, right? And it will never get rescheduled or anything like that. So just don't think that just because you're on there and you've got the stage that you can use and abuse that audience, because chances are that interview is going to get lost.
Wow. You know what? Ringmaster, we have our ways of uninviting people for our clients, and we have not tried that one. I wonder if we could do that, because that might look like we messed it up, but I guess we could always blame it on Squadcast, right?
Always blame it on the technology. Well, you guys do a very good job of vetting, right? You do the pre-interview. We've known each other. We've met each other, in real life. And so I think that makes a whole lot of difference there.
100%.
Before I'm going to introduce my audience to somebody, I want to make sure that they're bringing value on that.
Yeah. Okay. This got me really thinking about just guesting disasters, right? So what's the opposite of bringing value? And you mentioned that pitch thing, and that reminded me of a Joe Rogan episode where this gal he was interviewing kept saying, well, yeah, I mean, that's in my book, that's in my book. And it was so bizarre because she said it 8 times, and you could see even that guy, as chill as he was, smoking whatever he was smoking, eventually he was like, yeah, but could you tell me? Because I don't have your book right here in front of me. I'm like, could you give me, I get it, your book, you're promoting it, you're on Rogan, you'll sell millions, don't worry about it. But like, could you answer the question? So yeah, that pitch rule is that's just like almost like you need a bumper sticker, like no pitches,
Well, and it's, I hate the word pitch, right? I mean, even in podcast guesting, people say, well, do you pitch this show? Do you pitch that show? I know where the term comes from, right? You pitch an idea, you pitch a story, but all of a sudden it's becoming, you're just pitching people, and that's dehumanizing, right? You introduce them. And I think it goes back to, there's a best tweet I have ever seen came from Rand Fishkin.
Okay.
Rand owned a company called SEO Moz. And he said the best way to sell something today is not to sell anything, but to earn the respect, awareness, and trust of those who might buy. So I think where it really comes in on a great interview is after you've put all of these value out there, then to say at the end, well, where can people learn more? Well, tell them where they can learn more. Give them a place to go there, but don't be pitching the entire time. Yeah. Sort of help them take the next step. Don't be just trying to sell the product.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Having some kind of prepared list, some talking points. Do you prep folks? I mean, because you don't want to get too scripty, right? You don't want your guests when they're going out in the podcast you're placing them on to start reciting things. So do you have any advice for guests around that?
Yeah, it shouldn't be Groundhog Day. There's nothing more boring than the same interview over and over. At that point, people will stop listening to you because it's like, I've already heard this. So try to focus on one theme, right? This is really what we've been doing here. And then, just like any speech, right? If you're doing a keynote, well, maybe not a keynote, but if you're doing a speech, most of the time, if you've memorized the beginning and the end, we know how to start it and we know how to land it. You can just sort of make it up as you go in the center and just answer the questions.
Yeah.
Right. So that first question that most people will ask you is, so tell me about yourself. That is not the question. The question is, why are you here? Why should we listen to you? And what value will you get out of this? Right.
Yeah.
So make sure that you've got a tight answer for that. And then at the end, when they say, so Tom, how can people get in touch with you? Or do you have any final thoughts? Make sure you know what you're going to say there. And so many times I hear people go, well, you can find me on LinkedIn here and Twitter here and email me and here's my phone number. And it's like giving kids too many options. They'll never remember.
Yeah.
Our testing, and I'm an engineer by degree, so we do a lot of testing. The best results always come from sending people to one place. We call it a welcome page, right? So it's a little bit different than a landing page or a squeeze page. It still has the navigation. If they want to look around, they can, right? But you want to send them to, okay, here, behind the curtain. I'll make a page that's interviewvalet.com/CTGS for creating the greatest show. All right. You send them there because it's evergreen content going to an evergreen page. And
okay, let's get rid of the T. CGS. How about that? CGS/CGS.
Okay.
And we'll link to it in the show notes to make it super meta for people. So interviewvalet.com/CGS, and we'll link to it.
And I was going to say, this is not a pitch. If you want to see what a welcome page looks
sure,
like,
but this is good,
just go there.
Yeah, no, this is good.
Yeah.
So describe what people will see on this page, and people should click through because they can get a sense of what they'll see on a page, and they can contact you too.
Right. And so what you're going to see on there is, if you're listening to this, you have no idea what I look like or my website looks like. So the first thing that's going to pop up there is going to be the artwork for creating the greatest show. Right. So it's sort of that trust seal. And then there's going to be some boilerplate text. Right. You're going to see my picture, all my social media there. And then what we have found is, and digital marketers will cringe over this, right? Every digital marketer will tell you one call to action. We have found through 9 years of testing over 1,500 clients that giving people 3 ways to say yes always converts best. So it's more like meeting them where they are, right? So you give them a small yes, a medium yes, and then a heck yes. A small yes is just a quick win that will get them there.
Can you,
like for us,
do you have a page that already exists that you could like chat to me and then I will click on it? And that way I can ask you questions about it.
Oh, sure.
We'll pretend like I'm looking at the one you just described, because obviously you don't have it made just yet. And that's what this show is all about, right? It's that practical, like, roll up our sleeves. Okay, 3 ways to say yes. I'm dying to see that. And so it'll be fun to go look at that and figure out what are those 3 ways. I do love a good squeeze page, but I totally get the idea of having choose your own adventure. Let people email you or let them follow your show or tweet you or whatever.
Sure. Let me put this in the chat.
Oh,
Did
cool.
you get that?
I will click it. I see it.
So this is one I did for Jamie Masters years ago, and this is the one I always use as an example.
Oh, great.
So it doesn't mess up the analytics. But what you're going to see there, it's going to be welcome,
Yep.
show name, listeners.
Yeah, I see the
right?
splash image, and their show name, and I see the artwork like you've described. Yep.
You see the hero image, which is the podcast artwork. Then you see the guest's picture, right? All their social media there, so you can click on it if you want to go to their LinkedIn or whatever. And then there's 3 calls to action, and a small yes, medium yes, and a heck yes, right? So the first one that we typically
those
do
are the
is
3 at the bottom, right?
At the bottom, right? So if you scroll down, you'd get all 3. Most people are looking on their phone, so they just stack, right?
Oh, yeah.
So
good
small,
call.
medium, large.
Right? Good thing to point out to our marketing friends and non-marketing friends is that this page needs to be able to work on mobile, so that if they're listening and they click on that thing, they can see it. They're not going to be at their desktop listening. Okay.
Yes, and always check the pages on mobile, because we make them on desktops and then everybody looks at them, or majority of people look at it on a mobile device. So the small yes is just something to get them back there. Doesn't take much time or money, right? Assessments work well. Checklists work well. Even pictures or videos, right? And the one that I typically use is there's an assessment. 10 questions. Will podcast interview marketing work for me? Right? Everybody wants to know that answer.
Right.
Now, the medium yes always takes them a little bit more time or a little bit more money. Right? So that could be a face-to-camera video. It could be a training or a webinar. It could be a small product. For me, I always give away my book. Right? Because if somebody gets the book and reads it, that largely goes to a sale. And then, if you are answer to prayer, right? If somebody hears you on a podcast and they're like, oh, I need what Casey has, right?
Yep.
If they come with credit card in hand, wanting to talk to the wizard, don't slow them down in a funnel. Give them a way to buy or do a discovery call, something like that. And so that's why I always say, and if you'd like to talk with me or my team about how you could leverage podcast interview marketing, I'll put my calendar there and we can find a time to talk.
Love that. And you've got it integrated right there with HubSpot meetings. So it's beautifully just like lined up. Smart. Very clean. Yeah, I love these options, man. And what's great about it is I kind of want all of, you look at, and by the way, the microphone you're using, people need to click through because just see the example. The microphone, that copper microphone, well, not only is it on brand, but it kind of reminds me of a beer. So I had to look twice. I was like, is that a microphone or is that a beer on that icon? But it looks really
maybe
good.
That could be subliminal marketing
you know
right
what?
there.
Just claim it that you did it on purpose. And cool. So you got 3 different options. And I see above that even, I mean, I guess you could call this some smaller options. You've got links to your social, to your Twitter, right to your emails so people can connect. And I do like that you have that picture of you smiling there in case people have just been hearing you. They don't know what you look like.
Right. And sometimes you just want to put a face with the voice.
Yeah.
And, some people will want to connect via social media. That's fine, right? Make it easy for them. In the same way with putting all the navigation on the top,
Yep.
right? If somebody heard me for 30 or 45 minutes and is so interested that they want to look around the site, that's fine, right?
Yeah. Like take your time, click around, do that kind of thing. Very cool. Let me switch up a little bit. There's a couple things I want to address, and then I want to, because obviously we can't chat all day even if I want to. Better is better. I know this is a theme that you've set for this year. Tell me more about that. What does that mean?
I learned that from one of our clients. Steve Acho came to us, and Steve is a great recruiter. And he said, more is not better, better is better. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he's like, well, what if I got you, went to monster.com and I got you the 21 billion resumes from the 7 billion people on earth? Does that help you? Or what if I said, here are 3 great people that would transform your company? I think these 3 great employees. Which one is better? And I'm like, ooh, I know which one I would choose. And we're really focusing on this on podcast guesting also, because Casey, I'm a little bit almost embarrassed about this. I've done over 1,200 podcast interviews, and early on, I was just trying to do as many as I could, right? And what I realized is it's not just more and more appearances. It's what are you doing with them? Early on, I wasn't promoting them. I wasn't repurposing them. It was Groundhog's Day, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't moving the needle. It wasn't until I started to say, how can I do them better? How can I do better interviews? How can I promote them better? How can I repurpose them better? How can I be a better guest? And if you're doing, Groundhog's Day one after the other, you can't even remember what show it is, much less what stories you have told. And so that's one of the things with our clients we're really focusing on. A lot of people in the industry will just say, oh, you do more and more interviews, right? Because they're charging per interview.
Yeah, it's tempting.
Right? And
more, yeah.
We're not, but we're optimizing for results, not for our revenue. Because when our clients get results, they bring more clients. They stick with us. So we're always optimizing for results. And so with that, we'll tell our clients, just do better interviews, right? We'll work with you to promote them and get more out of it. Because at the end of the day, you get return on investment of your time and your money. And, for many of our clients, they're spending an hour between the interview and then prep time and all the rest of that. They don't have the time to do, one of these just random interviews every day.
Yeah.
We'd rather have them do one great one that's going to move the needle every week.
It's really interesting that you say that, right? Especially if you're even selling, the service of getting people on there. It'd be very easy for you to say, more is more, and then try to put people on 1,200 podcasts. But I could imagine having exchanged at least 1,200 hours of your life for these podcast interviews to go back and look at them and say, what did I or my business get out of these? And you don't even remember half of them because you were in quantity mode. I can see how you would, it's like you're the living proof. You go back and you're like, okay, where is the groundswell of attention that I got from the quantity? And it was like, it wasn't the quantity. I'm sure there was a few key ones that drove the most attention for you. You probably could track it on HubSpot.
We do. And not only that, but, remember that welcome page. That welcome page, if you hit it, I know that we're at the podcast you came from. So I can tell if it was a base hit or a home run. We can attribute everything with that. And so, it's really, what are you optimizing for with that? And, you think that so many times in life, like in the Marine Corps, right? There's is more is better or better is better, right? You can throw 1,000 dumb munitions, and maybe you'll hit it. Maybe you'll cause a lot of collateral damage. You'll make a whole lot of noise, or, send one smart round in, or one sniper. One sniper's bullet is all you need.
Yeah.
You don't need 1,000 artillery shells.
100%, man. I was fortunate to be in the military when better was better and not when quantity was better, right? I think back to World War II, and let's just throw quantity at this hill. Thankfully nowadays let's have small teams that are really, really smart and highly trained, and each one is very valuable as opposed to, let's draft a bunch of people.
And in business, if you got a great big business, maybe you can throw a lot of resources at it. But if you're a small business, you need to make sure that every dollar spent and every minute invested is producing results. And especially with podcast interviews, sometimes it's either senior leadership or the CEO or founder that's talking, right? If you're taking them away from other things for an hour, it better have some good results to it 100%. And not just wasting time.
100%, man. Now, one of our jobs as podcast hosts is to manage time. I know you've got your own really cool webinar coming up. Is that at 12:45 or is it 1? Do you have a hard stop? How's your schedule?
It's at 1. It's at 1:00 Eastern. We're going through the State of Podcast Guesting.
Love it.
2023.
Love it.
We've got every year. I'm a geek. We keep data on everything. In God we trust. Everybody else bring data.
And whether you throw that on your landing page or we put it in the show notes, either way, I'd love to link to that, even the recording of that, so that those listening to this can then, I would keep you right up to 1, but I should give you some time to prepare yourself to present that. Real quick. There are a lot of podcast bookers, and some of the worst guests I've ever had have come from podcast bookers, but some of the better guests I've ever had have come from podcast bookers. The reason we're talking is because thankfully the better ones have come from Interview Valet. But talk to me about that dirty secret of the podcast bookers who are giving your industry a bad name, flinging random people at hosts.
Yeah, and it's we're judged by the worst in our industry.
Yes.
Right. And so that could be salesmen. It could be podcast production companies. It could be real estate agents. Right. So the barrier to entry for somebody to say, I'll get you on podcast is pretty low. And most of them are doing without any data, any understanding. They're podcast guessing, not podcast guesting. And they're charging you to go on those the Trojan Podcasts there.
Yeah.
We really look at it. We've been around for 9 years, helped over 1,500 clients on 75,000 interviews. And we're really focused, like I said, on results. So I would say, if you're a podcast host looking for guests, make sure that you've got a pool of people you can go to, your go-to people. And those could be podcast, interview marketing agencies like Interview Valet. It could be a PR agency. It could be publishers, right? You look at somebody like the Marketing Book Podcast. Basically all the publishers go there with all their new books. Yeah. Great, right? So figure out where you can do that. And once again, more is not better. Better is better. Instead of taking random pitches from, 1,000 people, find those 5 or 6 that you trust, that know you, right, that you can have a conversation with and say, hey, this is who I'm looking for. And then give them your personal email. The rest of them can go to black hole at. Right? We've got some clients that our podcast relationship managers have known them for so long, they've got access to like their base camp.
Yeah.
And the podcast host says, just put all their information in the base camp. If I've got any questions, we can go through it. But at that point, it becomes almost like we become more like an unpaid assistant.
Yeah.
And sometimes people will ask us, well, why don't you charge the host? And I'm like, well, that sets up a huge conflict of
Yeah,
interest,
that's
right? We serve the host, and the host helps us, right? So
true.
we serve the host, but the client is our customer, if you will.
Absolutely. Final question, Tom. Paid placement. What are you seeing around paid placement? Charging your guests a fee, small and large, to be on the show.
Okay. I believe in capitalism,
Yeah.
right? I believe that
America.
people should be paid for what they do. And if you want to charge people to be on your podcast, that's your right, right? What I also believe in is transparency, right? And so does the government. And they've made it very clear that if you charge someone, you need to make sure that that's very, very clear. I mean, abundantly clear. Think about it on radio or television. Every time they come back from a commercial, it's like the following is a paid endorsement, right? I want to make sure that I know, is this an interview or is this an ad? And last year, it was in the fall. There was an ad or an article on Bloomberg about payola in podcasting. NPR picked it up. The FTC made a comment on it. And in Europe, there was a guest and a host that was found guilty of misleading the consumer. I believe that at some point, the FTC will crucify somebody and make an example out of them. Will they get everybody? No.
Don't be that one, though.
Will they get you? Probably not. I just look at the right thing. It's like there are some podcasts where anybody can get on there, right? You've got the 18-year-old life and business coach that's on there because he paid X number of dollars to get on there. The best podcasts that I see, they get the best guests because they've got great content, right? They're not just taking anybody that'll pay their fee.
Yeah. And then as a host, you end up interviewing people for the sake of it. And they could be the worst interview of your life. And, was it worth it in the end,
And they can come on and think, well, I paid for this, right? So I'm going to pitch. I'm going to abuse the audience, whatever.
I'm going to take control of the show unless you really, that's a whole business. But great point. It's almost like the litmus test is if you are comfortable telling the audience over and over and over again that this is a paid placement and then all the repercussions that come from that, then knock yourself out, try it, but know that you should be clear about the fact that you're getting paid for that interview.
Right. And even if the FTC doesn't come down, sooner or later, your audience is going to find out about it.
They're going to figure it out.
Right. They're going to figure it out. Something will come up and you're going to lose trust with them.
Which was the whole point in the beginning, was building trust.
Well, and it's a conversation, right? If we're going to have a great conversation here or, is somebody just pimping out somebody else's stuff. One of them feels ugly. The other one feels like it's more intimate and that the host is your friend. You just keep coming back to them.
Definitely changes the power dynamic, right? We're not peers. We're not both adventuring in this journey together. I'm putting up with you and you're getting value. It makes it a weird kind of reality that at least I don't like, but people should be aware that it will shift things for you.
It does. And as you were talking about that, it's like the difference between you invite me over for a barbecue, right? Oh, that's so cool. I can't wait to meet Casey and his family and his friends. And then you walk in the door and it's like, oh shoot, this is an Amway meeting. He's trying to sign me up into his downline. All of a sudden it went from, we've got a relationship to, oh, he's trying to use me.
Yeah. Hey, you want to sell some knives door to door, Casey? How about vitamin pills? Sign up here. You can be in my downline. Oh man, that's a great point to end on, Tom. Where can people connect with you? I asked this because I always ask this, but now we're all in the loop and we know the answer is going to be.
All right. Go back to interview Valet with a V.com/CGS. We'll have that assessment there. We'll podcast interview marketing work for me, the free copy of my book, Podcast Guest Profits. And if you want to talk about this, if you want to see how you could use podcast interviews to grow your podcast, to grow your business, or if you're just looking for great guests go back there to interviewvalet.com/CGS.
Awesome. Amazing. Tom, thank you so much for coming on here. I have enjoyed working with your team. I've enjoyed our conversations here always. I've certainly learned from you. I just appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Casey.
All right, everyone. If you learned something, because I know you did, because I literally have 2 pages of notes over here, front and back, then share this with someone else. Be a thought leader. 1 person, 9 people, 3,000 people, whatever the number is. Get good information in other people's hands. Tag people. Let them know about all these things we talk about. Don't be a Trojan podcaster either. So much good stuff here. Check out that page as well. And feel free to create your own when you do your guesting experience. Man, Tom, thanks again. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Casey.
All right, guys. This has been another crazy episode of Creating the Greatest Show. We will see you all next time. And next time doesn't have to be next week. Life's too short, and we have way too much to talk about. Find show notes full of takeaways, lessons, and links at creatingthegreatestshow.com. For more information on launching your own podcast or working with us to produce your existing show, come on down to the big tent at ringmaster.com. Until then, friends, whatever you do, do it with all your might. Work at it, if necessary, early and late, in season and out of season, not leaving a stone unturned and never deferring for a single hour that which can be done just as well now. P.T. Barnum.